The chiefs have deliberated and they don't have quorum here today, but they're going to put this on the floor. And we're going to send this out to the chiefs who are not present. And basically, the resolution that they're putting forward is that the Treaty 8 chiefs will direct administration to collaborate with member First Nations to develop a Treaty 8 Education Act following best and wise practices that emphasizes Indigenous ways of knowing, learning, and languages, and provide a first draft of the Treaty 8 Education Act within 6 months. So that's what the chiefs are putting on the floor. We're going to give them time to make some expressions. So we'll turn it over to, we'll start with Chief Capo, I think. Trying to see through the light.
Expressions on the motion or resolution or?
Whatever you want to talk about. We're going to open it up for the floors to make their speeches or.
You can do. That's the one I noticed. I want to say thank you to everybody for being here for the last 3 days. I know it's been a lot of information, but I think a function like this should have been held a long time ago. I think we'd be way further ahead than we are now. And like I said, I'm very proud of all the people that have sat here for the last 3 days, but I'm especially proud of a couple of my band members you all heard this morning. Seth Goodsumer-Ferguson and Rachel Manichus. I'm very proud to say I'm the chief of the community they're from. And it's only a small fraction of the talent that we have on reserve. I'm sure on any reserve. It's just today that they stood up and spoke out. And I also want to acknowledge my elders that was here, and my sister Margaret's here. She's well educated. But I guess the thing is, we always wait for people to do things. And that's the chief's of Treaty 8. We have to start doing things. Like before another 12 years passes, we have to do it now. While the people are sitting here in the room, the people in this room obviously support us. There's a lot of people here the last 3 days. I don't know what the numbers are, but that's the most people I've seen at any function hosted by Treaty 8 other than the AGM. But the thing I learned the most for me the last few days is again from the elders. And there was video playing of my brother Mike Beaver there during lunchtime. And that's what he's always trying to teach us. You know, we're all middle-aged. And it was interesting, I was talking to people outside, some elders from Whitefish, I think, Whitefish Lake. You know, they were talking about round dances with gold tone and all this stuff that we've lost, things that changed. Like, you know, they were explaining to me that the process of a round dance, everybody loves to kind of round dance. But that's not how they were taught, the way round dances are done now. Like in terms of giveaways, it was quite interesting because the story they told me was somebody giving a pair of moose hide gloves away. And that meant they were honoring that person with those moose hide gloves. But then they took their hand and danced with them, right? Just them. So that's the form of the original giveaway. And I think that's how it should still be. You know, the pipe ceremonies, even our age, like, I know I'm not the only one here. Our age. You know, we've still got lots to learn in those aspects of where we come from. In order for us to try and teach our kids where we come from, we have to know. And that's a part of lifelong learning. I hear that all the time. And going back to the video on the causes of things that happen, we have a CTA on our community. It's a tripartite agreement with the RCMP, federal government, and the province. I read the monthly statistics for our reserve, the crimes that happen every month. There's a summary of crimes. And you can see the systematic things that happen. You know, once in August you see it's car theft, whatever it is, criminal good offenses. But the last couple of months, it's been domestic violence. And you can see in that video, it's exactly that's what's happening. And until we start taking action, along with that domestic violence, it's not only alcohol abuse, but it's drugs. Like the drugs are getting really bad, out of control. I was late the first day because we were dealing with a drug issue. And I was quite shocked to learn of people selling drugs in our community, you know. It's not that I bury my head in sand. I just didn't know there was that many. When I was told there was 22 places on our reserve that people are selling drugs, I almost fell on the floor. So I took the time to stay and listen to a group of people Monday morning to see what we can do to stop that, or at least slow it down. And we basically came up with a plan, and that's why I found that video interesting, because it is. It's domestic violence leads to other things, like other vices, like drugs and alcohol.
I know where it is, I think you're at that.
And I just wanted to say I was proud to be a part of this function the last 3 days, and I want to thank Dale and his group, Grand Chief, the chiefs that sat there for 3 days, the people that attended for 3 days. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, elders. I'd like to start by thanking Elder Beaver for the pipe ceremony and prayer to start this event off. I'd like to thank the women. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here today. They're the keepers of our land. I've learned this through my limited teachings as I move towards embracing my Cree culture. And I'm still an infant in that stage. I would love one day to be gifted with my Cree language. I still struggle with that, and I'm sorry for not being able to speak Cree today. The last 3 days has been very enlightening for me. I haven't been involved because I'm not a chief, I'm just a proxy for Drift Pile. And I've had the opportunity to sit as proxy for former Chief Rose Levican, who was really empowered me as a young man in my community and taught me a lot. And I sit here today on behalf of Dean, who was unable to come, Dean Giroux. We have a lot in common. He's got a big heart as well and means well for his community. I guess for me, moving forward, there's a need for a big communication strategy in delivering these messages, not just to the council, who are also responsible outside of the chief forum, but to the grassroots members themselves, so they understand the need for these structures. And I really commend the technicians under Dale who have done so much, and it's been very evident the last 3 days how much work you guys have put into this and the effort. And I've been known to criticize, and I never ever meant to offend anyone for the hard work you guys put in. I've always admired that. But I guess for me, moving forward, what I see is a disconnect, because even though I love being in Treaty 6 territory and love all the amenities of being able to stay here in the city, including going to the Cineplex Odeon or wherever in the evenings, I want to be able to embrace our territory as well. I think these forums need to happen at home so more people can attend. I also want to encourage, or at least suggest, that the Treaty 8 office actually move to the Treaty 8 territory permanently, or at least we can rotate where these meetings are going to happen. I'd love to go Waverless Barker's home and have coffee after a meeting like this in his town hall. You know, we've shared a lot of stories. There's been a lot of struggle, and I actually see that hope and moving things forward in a positive manner coming out of these good works you guys have put in. Chief Muskie.
I don't speak English. All the three speakers are gone. them to 2.5 Ds. And on the presentations, they're like, I like the bridge presentation. You know, because First Nations country, we're always about spirituality. And, you know, like, I think there's a universal faith out there that believes in Christ and the cross. It's everywhere. You see this in symbols everywhere. And the bridge, I believe, that needs to be restored is that one of faith in our beliefs. You know, in our faith that Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice of God, I don't need to make any more sacrifices to return to God. I need to believe and abide and walk in His will. You know, the residential schools, they did not teach us of how wicked this God is, but it was a manifestation of how wicked man is. And you know, we can't build anything going forward. We can't construct anything going forward on blame. You know, we can blame up to a certain extent. I want to be in a place where I know what they really do. You see the symptoms, like I said. You see the symptoms, but what are the sources of all those symptoms? Let's deal with the source. I was kind of thinking of the presentation and the holistic approach, and if I was a teacher sitting in the audience there, boy, that's probably the last place I want to go was First Nations school. I'd have to be a counselor, a shrink, you know, and all that stuff, right? So when thinking about that, I know there's a big part where elders have to play in our education system. The parents play a big part. You know, the public plays a big part. I think the area that I'd like to focus on, okay, what are the stuff that are fixable, doable, the continuation of those, and I believe that is basically our own Treaty 8 Education Act, I'll say, or a division of First Nations Education Act. Whichever sounds better to you, and you know. And then the other one is the statutory funding. We have our statutory funding in place, that we're not begging for money so we can do this, we can do that. That it's a process of going forward to educate our people, to ready them, and basically develop or create the tools for their career paths, their goals. And you know, that's the best thing I guess about as a parent is you always expect what's best for your child, your grandchild, it doesn't matter who. But a lot of times we do not look at how detrimental our words are to their upbringing. When you start blaming a system or blaming somebody for where you are today, you're teaching your kids right from where they can understand the language to blame somebody else for where they are. I'd rather, you know, engage it with the people. You know, I've heard this this phrase a while back. Everything you do as a leader, everything you do as a person that's going to benefit others, you will have 90% of the time people will criticize your efforts. We need to in turn ask, if you in turn ask those 90%, okay, what shall I do? What is your recommendation? What is your option? And of those 90%, maybe 10% will give you an option. Because that's who we are as a people now. We're just there to blame somebody else for our plight, I guess. We can't keep going forward like that. A lot of times sometimes they say, take the bull by the horns and let's do something. I think I've been a strong enough advocate for that process. I am a leader in our community, and when we sit at these tables, we look at a collective front, a collective strength. You know, we just have to unite in that direction and say, enough is enough. This is what I want for the future of First Nations people. We need to get there. And I was going to move that motion that was going to be made, and I'll still move it when the time comes. But, you know, we see all, again, the symptoms. And we see all our values and our people that are, the resources are there, the people resources are there. They're all there, it's just piece it together. And that was the most what, you know, telling Dale and his staff, put it together, what does it look like? Let's go forward. Thank you.
Chief Burgundy. Hi everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank my members for coming from Beaver First Nation. We have about 5 or 6 members here along with our elders. We have a couple council here, and this is one of the first meetings that we've actually done that. And I have to say that this meeting, for me, was a lot more tolerable and informative than a lot of the others. It is a 3-day meeting. You know, it is a long meeting, but our education is so important that we need meetings like this. We need to come forward together with our ideas and, you know, see where it takes us. For me, you know, education is one of the most important parts of, you know, our job. But for me, it's not just educating our First Nations people, it's educating everybody else also. We can't expect to, you know, just educate the First Nations people on our plights and, you know, the reasons why we are where we're at. We have to push forward and make sure all the non-First Nations people are educated in our plight also. You know, it's nice to sit here and listen to everybody, learn. At the time, you know, like many of the other chiefs have said, you know, it's been a long time coming, and we have to move forward. One of the other things I like to do is, you know, I talk to a lot of people, and I learn a lot from everybody. If you have a simple conversation with somebody, you have to take advantage of it. You have to listen to them, and you have to take something home. Because every simple conversation, you learn something from somebody. And as a chief, you never stop learning. You know, I see a lot of my colleagues up here that are still learning to this day. And that makes me feel real like I'm in a good place because of what we're learning. You know, we're not only educating other people, we're educating ourselves while we're sitting here. So, you know, I really want to thank Treaty 8 for this wonderful event. It's very special to me. I love it. I'm very happy to see the cameras here, and anybody that's listening and watching, thank you. Please spread the word. And, I hope everybody has a safe trip home. I love you all, and take care.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Benwell, Policy Chief for Smith Landing First Nation. Again, I would like to thank everybody, the facilitators, especially the elders, the Grand Chief, all the chiefs, and each and every one of us that turned up here. This is a very good, very, very informative. I will go back. I got notes out there here to go back to. And I do really have to encourage everybody and push that we encourage one another and think positive for this, because now the tables are starting to turn, that it's not the government that's going to look after the natives, it's going to be the natives that are going to be handling their money, giving their education. Things are turning to that way, so we all have to be working together and to work at this. I strongly feel we will be doing this. I have confidence in all of us that we will be doing this. Like I said, it's been a very good, informative 2.5 days, about 3 days, and I really encourage that we do this again more frequently, and because this is just sort of like the icebreaker, we're starting to look at it, and it's going to work out. And with all this info that I do have, I will give all my information to membership so they know exactly what's coming down in the future. You know, we're not always going to be caught in that little bubble with government overriding us. This one lady had this good PowerPoint with how the First Nation was on top and all the different categories at the bottom. I think that's really wonderful. And again, thank you all for inviting me, and I feel very privileged for being the proxy chief for Smith Landing First Nation. Thank you.
Chief Preston. I say Chief, Shalitiga, Exene. Tagi Dene or that I was in there. Let's call it's a deal. Tau Dene Sego, a Kiwis in the which is now again. Tidos in the Gonze. Did he answer the Jose? They need to keep it up. Slightly hot days in the house. And you will hold. You go, then again on the home, next to me, you said, like point out to the deal, because it all takes a detail. Then clicking on the day without them. And let's call yesterday. That was yesterday, Kadiga, and you ever yelled. It was residential school, it could have been on you. Naturally, that's a day see. Such a down, Kari Lao, the child can see that. That could be like see between Diego to make up a young I see. Get a devil yard. Let's let call dog devil yards, let's see. It will hear some pepper on the ear. It will see the was. Let's let quiet. Could you? Cái ta nhiều về điều của điều gì, ý sẽ để ý cảm thấy kể ra theo, sẽ đi cái nó sẽ đi được thế nào, ta thì thế này là hàng nhiều, sẽ đi cái để chiếu, là cái group metro, là hàng nhiều gì, mắt xích gì, ý chỉ đó cái điều gì đấy. Idige ko sahabi sinike ujo inde edu sido ke ho inde I kafanikige ide o kawene taubo inde ila I kalamasi o de da ho da kwan sido I ho kisi kwedo de no o te ko ho ya o mas I'd like to thank the elders, the creator, and the participants. You make this happen. Education is not only one avenue for communities. Education starts at a young age until we are elderly. I am proud of the two youth that were speaking earlier. The way they talk, they're not talking as youth. They're not talking as they were talking as wise members of our community. They see the future that they hold and what they're going to do for their community. As a community leader, we need to support youth initiatives like that and encourage our youth. Not when you're ready to be a leader, you're a leader at any stage of your life. I consider myself as an elder to my community members that are younger than me. I appreciate what the community, their chief has put in for them, and then I encourage everyone to do the same. And again, I like where the dialogue and the action items needs to be addressed. Still, we need to have the chiefs here to do a quorum and provide that resolution. We are not blinded anymore. We've long time awakened from what's in front of us. Collectively, we need to work together more. Our divisions with our set boundaries, this is my territory, this is your territory, should have to stop. We're not Munia, we're not Mola. We are Ninius, Dene. Merci.
Chief Isaac, Glen Creek.
Thank you. Lista Kilanons Kumtanawa Kakeo, Kasagi Hitten Kakeo. It's been really a pleasure for me to be here, attend today. I know I had a proxy here for the last 2 days. One of the things that I wanted to comment about today is we also have to support the youth, but we also have to support them in physical activity. You know, like I've heard a lot about the mindset and the education, but we also have to learn to teach them almost how to play cooperatively now. You know, like I've got some young children at home, and I know technology is a big influence nowadays. And then when the youth spoke, they said back in the old days when it was pen and pencil and paper, and I'm like, holy man, I can't be that old. So part of the holistic approach is we really do have to focus in on some of the physical activity in sports, and that is a big influence that has been lost or watered down a little bit. Because I remember myself growing up, you know, we find ways to be kicked outside. Nowadays, it's hard for our kids to put them outside, and there used to be a lot of cooperation between communities and the competitive sports days and all of this stuff. We need to really try to motivate that or spark it a little more. And there's I read this one thing in a book I was reading once, and I'll try to repeat it. I'll probably mess it up. But it said, if you know yourself, if you're preparing for battle, if you know yourself, but you don't know your enemy, you will lose the battle 50% of the time. If you don't know yourself, but you know the enemy, again, you will lose 50% of the time. But if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will win 90 to 100% of that time. And when I talk about trying to get into the battle, it's not that, it's about education. You know, we're forced into education. We have lost our identity. You know, now let's educate ourselves re-educate ourselves of who we are, who this Western society is, and we will continue that to get educated, you know, and we'll get above ourselves. We are here today. This is an awesome forum. More and more people are coming, and more of us are saying, "Hey, what can we do? How can we support each other?" You know, and we're doing it. So I'm looking forward to making some of the resolutions and taking the next steps. You know, I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues and having the support of communities and elders and the youth. So, hi.
Good afternoon. I'm Jose, proxy for Little Red. The past 3 days, I've kind of mingled with the crowd outside the lobby, talking to the elders, the youth. You guys, a member from Little Red, back in the mid-80s, our communities decided to take over our own education. So it's going on 30 years now. You know, I feel like we have some success stories in our community. Like I said to the chiefs yesterday, we have a lawyer now. We have one working to be a doctor, we have some nurses, a lot of teachers, child welfare agencies, staff members at CISA, there's lots. My God, we still have a lot of work to do. It's been a long time coming for 3 to 8. I know we've talked about it, but in council before, we've talked about it. So thinking back the past 30 years, our goal, the first 10 years, we're going to go out and get our own teachers in our own communities. 30 years later, I think we have 10, maybe 11 teachers from our own members that are teachers. But I've been going up there the past little while just to see where things are at. I think there's only 2 working in our system. And our goal is to also have our own people that were going to be directors. That was our 15-year plan. To this day, I don't see that. I mean, we've tried some, haven't worked, but we got to keep trying. So last night, driving back here, I stayed and visited some of the elders. So I called the chief last night, so I'm going up there this weekend. We're going to go through we're going to rip everything apart, put it back together and see where things gone wrong. As a member of Little Red, as a community member of Don Prairie, it saddens me to hear, like last year alone, we lost 14 teachers. That's the biggest turnover in a long time. And I compare it to where my wife works. Their school system's twice as big. There's 0 turnover. So there has to be something wrong. So if you keep replacing teachers year after year, we're failing our youth, we're failing our young people. So that's why we need to come back. Now we need to work collectively at 3 to 8. So that's my goal. Is that I'm going to get involved. I told Chief Gus last night I'm going to come home and get involved. Even if I have to volunteer my services, I will get involved. It saddens me. The violence, Chief Capel, we have that in our communities. Back in a day when I was 17 years old, my co-fund thought I was too young to leave after grade 9 because that's all we had was up to grade 9 in the community. So I stayed back a year and helped around, the community, stopped having a trap line. Told them when I was 16, they thought I was old enough to go to school. So they back in Northland ran the school, and we had no choice. They picked and choose where we lived. So they put us right from Dunbar Prairie, 6-7 hours away to Peace River, and Mooney home. So one night when I was laying there, I thought, we can't do this. So after, that wasn't a few years later, that's when I was 21 years old, and we finally took our school, and I was one of the board members. That's the first thing we posted for high school in our own communities. We have that now. We have the Great Wall, and we have our Catholic College. But we still have a lot of work to do, so I'm looking forward to working with the technicians, the chiefs, and the others. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, and good to see all the teachers and the educators in this room. And I know things seem really tough sometimes, but I know we're making some headway. Every year things get a little better. But in the last few days, I learned a new word: rematriate. And I know the Indian Act wiped out that word, matriarchs and matrilineal. It's all towards the European system of the patriarchs and patrilineal. But I know in our communities it's always been patrilineal. You cannot tell me to this day that my mother was not a matriarch. My dad used to enforce that. He would say, outside the home, that's where I belong. I do the jobs, I bring the food, but inside the home, you respect your mother. She's the one that runs that house. And that's one thing I'll never forget. And I know it works that way in all Aboriginal homes. It's still there. And if I had more time to tell, I'd tell you a story about that. But I know we're running short of time, and I don't want to take too much time. There is something though, on this resolution that we're drafting out. I know we don't have enough chiefs here for a quorum, but perhaps maybe to keep it so that it doesn't, lag here, maybe we could do a special resolution. We don't really need a quorum, just hold, just as a placeholder. So perhaps maybe we could do that. As a. So it's up to the floor, and but that's my suggestion.
Justina, stop. Bring your pad.
If while waiting, we'll turn to proxy Johnny. You're gonna say some closing remarks.
Sure. I'm Marina Noko from Chippewa Prairie, proxy for Chief Vern Janvier. That's Ruth Thou.
First of all.
Well, I did learn a new word today too. And I heard a lot of Cree today over the past few days. So I couldn't understand actually nothing of it. So, but I learned a new word today, and it is powwow. Powwow. I think that means welcome. But I'm Marina Noko from Chippewa Prairie. proxy for Chief Herb Janvier, who was my brother. I requested my brother to send a proxy because I believe that education is really important and we needed representation from our community at this table. But I sit here not as representing a leader, I'm sitting here as a mother. That is my primary role. I have 3 children, and I learned lots over the past several days. Some of the things I heard were heart-wrenching because as a mother, I can relate to some of those stories. In the name of education, I kept thinking, in the name of education, we allowed our children to be taken away from us, from our grandmothers, our mothers, you know, and today still, my children have to leave the reserve. I left home at the age of 12. You as leaders have the power, have the capability to change that. We need to move on it now. And we need it done today, not tomorrow, today. Because we're losing our children. We're losing our language. We're losing our culture. We need to change that. My children are white. Si danati dynasty. Sayati up. Harlu sa Johnny Danila. Holo sa skin of Ratilasan. Hosi the doctor. Si Odanas Tanila. About la sa Dani. Ay yata no Afghanistan. Dana that Udai Kaha. Ay hard than a nut survey. Si Tana Hashi Holo. That Uhabas and Afghani. Hamacho. Ay at the nuts are asking that. Zakunatser. Holo that Utina Johnny and the Dela. No Tulu and Unobahutini. Ay Kate than a Jazzy Dela. To Tinagis he tells him. Hot Abino, other no be dying. A year, Bahala Tila, a Bakada Jew, Bahal, Radale Tade, a Sa. Sa is in a Gideasan. No as came Papa. Only no buy like no as Kena. And it is Keno, a Yeha. Losing a call Marcilla no as at Harlingdale, Baron Chief. Mercy.
So we have a special resolution on the floor. Justine is working on the wording here. I did want to, I guess, give a suggestion to the chiefs in terms of the possible wording. When we start looking at, and this is based on my own private experiences, because I was a chief at one time, and I know the community I come from, we actually created our constitution, and we've built acts to hang on that constitution. And an example of that would be our Membership Act, which is based on, we took all terms of reference of status out of that, the context of that, because it didn't fit what we consider as members of our nation, because we recognize that a lot of our members are married out and marrying other races of people. And so we needed to incorporate that. At some point, status will come to an end. So in those discussions, we started talking about some of the language that we used. One of the things we have to remember is that Treaty 8 First Nations of Alberta is a federal incorporated organization. When we start going down the road of discussing acts, these things, they need to be based on your sovereignty as sovereign people. And within the Assembly of Chiefs, you have that voice, because the Assembly of Chiefs is not incorporated. So within that function, you can start to build within the constructs of acts, but I would suggest maybe perhaps using convention in place of an act. So, in my recommendation is basically something maybe along the lines of Convention on Education for Treaty 8, based on the premise of the Assembly of Chiefs, as opposed to the organization itself. So I just wanted to throw that on the floor, and we'll turn it over to, I guess we'll be looking for a motion or someone to make a mover and a seconder to Billy Joe's recommendation.
Just a recommendation, I guess, since we don't have a quorum, can it be passed in principle? Then maybe you can send an email or request to the First Nations to give the authority to the executive to pass it at the executive table. That would work. If we can pass it here in principle at this table. Because I'd like to see everybody on board with this. And I'd like to see support from all the 24 First Nations endorsing this and say, we are on board, we support the motion, we give the authority to the executive board to move on it and direct the administration and the education director to start the process. Any? Moved by Chief Apple, second by Chief Burgundy. So all in favor? And I will not do deal. Thank you. So that's what we'll do. If the process will start, we're a lot further ahead this way. So that, we're not delaying the process where the technicians are waiting for us again one more time for another 12 years. So how will I be called?
So closing words will go to the Grand Chief, and then we're going to have Elder Mike Beaver close with a prayer. We also have a drum group that's on standby, and we're going to request an honor song in honor of all the people of Treaty 8, and prayer that the movement forward, as I said earlier, when the train has left the station, we're going, and that we have good fortune as we move forward. So we'll ask the drum group to also sing the flag out, especially this one here that's been sitting with us and speaking for us and standing for us for the last few days. We'll have the Eagle staff retired, and then execute.
Thank you. Atiote ani one. Nas mautawi anus kisigaw. Uteki tautego ya bi sabun makuma anus kisigaw. studisto tới Apia. Myyhtiin tämän sisimo mä toskia. Tuossa sanottu tiinan jo minun peittoa, minun peittoa. Ujohuin maalla siitä studisto teidän asuman. Naskuma oikeastaan sääjä, tatuskin Uma oikeastaan on naskut nauli, jos jollakin pitää luhtiikista on naskut nauli. Isto stei China, kan siis se muhtia ja tinian. Tekijöi niitä on kaipaskin. Maamu muhtita. Kiamata tai minua asko. Kigoja ko ipamos kauja kui pitosi ka kui siubengia. Imata Pakio esino vichuta rina kanikatuga kaniano tito. Visto igawi umagawi tu tamako pasora kui miupaita utinina Pakio uskaisino awasis angi gusto kapeato sisi puhuta kawi magnitma kawi tutma kawi mamo uhui kawi kaskitano status kyllä tajano Pakio an sisi on kawi miupaita tasino kikilo an sisi kawi vichea hotoasun sino awassa angi kawansiho kakio tuma mope uta skogana nama gasimo ngabasitan. First of all, I want to thank the most important people in our lives is our mothers. Our mothers that gave us life, that brought us here. For the commitment and hard work they did for us to raise us. And back in the days where there's no electricity, everything was done by hand. And there's a lot of big families. We had a big family. And just think about my mother and probably other mothers that did the same thing day in, day out, washing our clothes and hanging it and be able to feed us and care for us. That's the most beautiful gift that a mother can give a child. And to have that unconditional love. You know, just wanted to acknowledge my mother. She's passed away a few years now, right to the bitter end, right before she took her last breath. She acknowledged me. And I'm grateful for that. The reason why I really support the issue of the missing and murdered woman is the fact that this issue stems from the residential school after effects. Because of family violence in the homes, where the women are forced out to the street and they end up, not by choice, to try to do the best for themselves. I've attended a lot of workshops, a lot of speaking engagements in regard to this issue because I see the importance of it. I see the importance of having a woman stand beside us. There's a lot of good educated women, very good role models in our communities. You know, I did a ride-along with one of the RCMP officers here in Edmonton, and as we were talking, I asked him a question that I always wanted to ask, what is the oldest woman on the street that's working? And what is the youngest? And the officer's name was Joe Verhey. He said to me, the oldest is about 69, and the youngest is about 9. You know, we can't say it's not our problem. When our people fall through the cracks, where they don't qualify for funding that we get on our home reserves because it's only deemed for our communities, that people living on reserve, they become a provincial responsibility that the province will not take responsibility for. That's where the challenge is that for us to work with governments to try to find ways how we can help our women. We need to empower our women. We need to protect our women. As men, we're protectors, not abusers. To be an abuser don't mean you have to be physically abusive. You could use your mouth to hurt a woman or hurt each other. And that's what the child learns at home. And that's what they take to school with. And that's what they end up in the community with all this lateral violence that goes on. You know, now the issue of bullying. Years ago it was in the playgrounds, in the classrooms. Today now, we call it cyberbullying. Using all the social media to hurt one another with our mouth. You know, there's questions asked, where do we start? Everything we start at home, at our home base. You want to help yourself? You know, that's where you make that change. I had to change my ways. You know, many years ago, I would be here. I wouldn't even dream of being a council member of my nation, let alone the chief or grand chief of Treaty 8 First Nation of Alberta. We need to stop this bullying that goes on. We need to start talking and treating each other as human beings and as people. We need to stop laughing at each other, but laugh with each other. Be able to share like our ancestors have done. Sometimes policies divide us, and that's what we're trying to educate the provincial government, that we're Albertans too. That when they bring in the newcomers to this country, the people that are seeking refuge in our country, both federal and provincial governments are allowing them with no consultation. I'm not saying no. I'd be the first one to reach out and help somebody come in. But there has to be respect. When some of my people are on the street, when some of my people are living in third world living conditions in this city, in other cities, in different places, and yet they roll on the red carpet. Free housing, free education, free everything. And once again, we're at the bottom of the list for that. Instead of fighting, I want to educate the government. They're human beings, they're not machines. We can help them change, we have to show them how to do it. And it's a very important issue that we're just finishing up here. Education is the way to do it. We got so much talent in our communities. Everybody will have to agree with me. So much raw talent. I was watching that documentary on the news last night where a community turn to recreation to help children to excel in their classrooms. And they've done that. They've done such a wonderful job of it in Ontario, Sulapau, Ontario, I believe. And for me, it really makes me feel good knowing that a non-Aboriginal person can reach out to our children and help them. And some of these children were thinking about suicide. And that's what you have in our homes, when you have a sense of hopelessness in our communities. We have to give them something to look forward to. We have to teach them how to respect, how to be self-disciplined, how to love. And the language, our home language, whether it's Dene, whether it's Cree, is what needs to be the forefront. Our children have to have best of both worlds. Today, our children are more challenged than we were growing up. There's so much social media out there, so much racism that goes on. But it's our responsibility to do something about it. I always keep this thing on my Facebook, not my Facebook, I don't even own Facebook. I hate Facebook. I used to be nosy, but I'm not nosy no more. I always have a little reminder. A reminder that was given to me by my partner, Caroline. And she taught me, and my children really taught me about love, about respect. And what I put here says, we talk about our future leaders. Well, if we don't empower our women, if we do not support them and respect them, if we fail our women, we fail our future generation. With that, I just want to say thank you and appreciate it, and I'm very honored to be here. This position there's a lot of, I give a lot of respect to the position that it brings a lot of support for the Chiefs, and I want to thank the Chiefs for their support. It's an honor to be working with everybody. I'm not above anybody. I always look at myself as a helper. With that, I thank you all for attending here the last 3 days. Now, safe travels home. I hear on SWAT checking the weather, it's blowing snow, 25-kilometer wind, southeast wind, so be careful out there. Safe drive safely. No, go ahead.